Yo, yo, yo,
Hey,
yo.
hey. This is Ashkahn.
And I'm Graham.
And we have a question from somebody that we are going to answer today on this podcast.
That is a really good description of what we do here.
Yeah.
And that question is...
Yeah, it was your cue.
Yeah, it wasn't the best cue that I've taken. What are the most common / expensive construction mistakes you've seen float centers make?
Yeah, there are some big ones that you can make.
Yeah, and we've talked about some of them here, too, just kind of scattered across different episodes. So, go back and listen to every episode and see if you can spot them. It's kind of like a Where's Waldo? Where's Waldo kind of thing.
All right, let's do this thing.
Okay.
Number one, the...
Carpet. Putting carpet in your float room.
That's not very common.
But it is expensive.
It's not even as expensive as other things.
That's true.
You just have to rip the carpet out. Number one, not improperly sloped floors.
Super common.
Super common and very difficult to fix / expensive.
Yeah, because you have to tear out your flooring, reslope things.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. And it's just hard. It's just hard. You have like all these floor drains in your room and they all need to have like slopes going down to them. And it's a very small room and, you don't have like this crazy elite concrete guy because you have a relatively small project compared to other concrete projects in the world.
I'd say that's actually what makes it the most, like, one of the most common. Like, a lot of people try to slope their floors. We've just, we've seen so many centers that they've made an attempt to slope their floors, and what happens is, like, half of the slope works and half just dumps the water out their door or does something equally as awful,
just like a pool. Like, as soon as you get, like, a little bit of puddling somewhere, it means you have to clean that spot up every single time forever. Like, every single transition, you need to have to be like, okay, gotta go get this puddle spot. And so that's why it's so annoying. Like, little tiny mistakes that lead to something where the water doesn't go down the drain well is like continuous ongoing work for you and your staff for the rest of the time that you have that there.
Which is expensive in staffing cost and then also expensive to fix for something relatively little. You're like, wow, I wish this room drained better. And it's like $40,000 to go in and like actually correct it for all your rooms. It's insane. So yeah, that's a really good one. I would say...
number two.
Yeah, number two was the ceramic tile and cementitious grout.
Mm-hmm.
I would say is hugely expensive, right? Because not only... So you need to use certain types of tile and grout for it not to be destroyed by salt water. That's going to be usually porcelain tile and epoxy grout. And that's not obvious necessarily if you've not worked in this kind of corrosive setting before. Even in wet environments, they'll use non-porcelain tile because having the and non-epoxy grout because having water soak in and then be able to evaporate is actually part of how a lot of tile rooms work and function. But in this case, they can't be porous because salt water will wreak havoc on them. So using them not only means that you have to go back and redo all of your tile and all of your grout when it starts decaying and cracking and stuff like that. But you're likely to have water damage on all of the soundproofing and the expensive work that you did behind that tile.
Yeah.
So likely tearing out all of your soundproofing or at least a layer of it.
Big trouble.
You might have mold back there, in which case you need to do mold remediation as well. Yeah, so improperly sealing your walls and waterproofing in general, but I'd say within that is like a main category is just using the wrong kind of tile.
Yep, and grout.
Yeah. Number three, not having enough space to get your float tanks in and out of the room they're supposed to go into. Oh, good one.
Boom.
Yeah.
Super common. So many stories out there of people building beautiful, nice, soundproof, waterproof walls and then realizing their float tank's too big. It doesn't like turn quite right because the hallway's too narrow, or you're just not quite making it up or down a staircase, or it's not getting through the doorway, or for whatever reason, you now have to cut out a chunk of beautiful, thick, soundproof, expensive, waterproof wall to be able to get a float tank in. And anytime you would ever want to get that float tank out of the room, which doesn't happen that often, but it does happen, it's like it's built into the room. You have to like cut that same wall out. Huge trouble. Super common.
Yeah, that's a good one. That is a good one. We see it's happened so often.
Number four?
Number four. For Lido. Quattro. I would say extending your soundproofing all the way to the ceiling, but to the ceiling, but not to the roof.
Right.
So not extending your soundproofing past your ceiling all the way to the roof or the next story.
Yeah.
Because you've just built these nice soundproof walls. You've surrounded your float tank with them. Your ceiling is finished or was finished before you did this. And the time to do ceiling work is when there's nothing else around for it to fall on, for you to have to kind of like wedge little pieces up into the joists and stuff like that. And if you don't extend your soundproofing up past where your ceiling is, so you actually have this kind of full barrier going all the way up to the next level of your building, then it means sound is just going to go right past all of your soundproofing. It's just going to kind of hop over your wall. Like it follows the path of least resistance. So it's going to go through your thin ceiling, over the top of your wall and back through a thin ceiling right into your float room. So it's kind of all of this money wasted on the soundproofing that you did build because you're not achieving near what it's capable of if you had just raised it up a little higher.
Raise the roof.
Gotta raise the roof.
I guess raise the walls.
And the other expensive part is it's not cheap to go back and replace that. To go in, you either have to decide, like how you're going to tackle this. Are you going to cut a thin slice of ceiling out on either side and then wedge little pieces in, which is what we did at Float On and was a very long process and tedious, and hands still kind of hurt from thinking about doing that. Or are you going to, tear out a bigger portion of the wall so it's easier to extend back up, but then you just wasted a ton of money and resources building and finishing this wall that you're now tearing out a little bit so you can extend it higher. So, getting that right from the beginning is another big one. Number five?
Number five. Not having float tanks. So many people build these beautiful float centers and then they just don't put any float tanks in them.
Get out of here.
What are your customers going to float in, It's crazy. Super common.
All right, number 6. Do you actually have a number 5
No,
over there?
that's it. I think those are the most. Those are the only problems that I think can happen.
I'll say another one for soundproofing that's common but not entirely expensive to fix is not getting unnecessary vibration into your float tank. You either set up the float tank so that it's touching a wall, or it's not touching a wall, but it's one that's built in like a cabin style, like an ocean float room or something. And when you build it in, it's just, those wooden pieces that you're using as the mounts for the kind of outside finishing are just right up against a wall. It's drilled into a wall. The base is just touching the floor. These are all weak points where, despite all of your soundproofing, vibration is one of the hardest things to block out, which is why it's so important to completely isolate your float tank from anything else. Having a vibration isolation system down underneath it. We use vibration isolation pads with a little stand on top of it, making sure that it's not coming into rigid contact with the walls, making sure that even for its pump system, that the pump system is up on vibration isolation pads. And there's just no way for sound to travel through the ground or the walls into the float tank without some kind of disjointed, semi-air gap going on there. And so that one's not expensive to fix, but it is really common.
Yeah.
And it's expensive in the sense that you've invested a lot in soundproofing. You're not making 50% out of the use to it just because you didn't go that extra 10% and make sure that everything's actually isolated from vibration.
Yeah. So there you go. 6 top reasons that 6 common mistakes.
Oh,
that people
5.5. Yeah.
Yeah, your last one was kind of a half one. If you guys have other questions that we can answer in list form like this, then go over to floatanksolutions.com/podcast and type them in, and you may just hear it. You may just hear us talking about it.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.